Welcome to
Hello.
Sydney. How
Thank
are you?
I'm super excited to be here.
Caffeinated?
I am fully caffeinated.
Excellent.
Australia has a great reputation for its coffee, and it's
With
not
good reason.
It's not disappointed.
I'm very glad to hear that. The weather has disappointed, but we'll move on from that. It's not important.
Yeah, everybody's been apologizing about your weather. I actually think the weather is great. I'm fine. Yeah.
We'll go with that. So I'm actually really glad that Annabelle didn't read out your full bio, because that would have been an insane thing to listen to, because you have the most illustrious career I've really ever read on paper. And I'm excited to talk through all the varied elements of your career so far. But I think a good place to start is kind of at the beginning, when you were studying. So you were at Berklee and you were studying music and business management. And I'm keen to understand, not that it was that long ago, but back then.
It was a long time ago.
How was creativity, how was music, how was business and this kind of entrepreneurial spark fostered back then when you were studying at Berklee?
Great question, but then not surprising given the book you wrote. So I grew up in Cyprus, and hopefully, because you guys are Australians and you're part of the Commonwealth, you know where Cyprus is. Unlike most of my American, colleagues who think it's a place in California, which it is, but it's spelled differently. Not the tree, the country. I went to Boston a long time ago, in '91. Most of the people in the audience probably were not even born. And it was just a different era. I mean, I grew up at a time when, as a young Cypriot kid, the only way I could access any English music or popular music was either through BFBS, which is the broadcasting service for British Armed Forces. And there was a great DJ called John Vickers who played all kinds of cool English music, and I used to tune in because Cypriot radio played no pop music the way that I describe pop. Or I used to go to the British Council and get books and read what jazz was all about, because I had no idea, and I would listen to the occasional jazz record. Or I would go to my local video store and get pirated copies of Top of the Pops. That's the way that I access music. I mean, just think how different it is today. I have two 11-year-old daughters, and, if we're talking at dinner and, I'll be saying something about Joni Mitchell and Big Yellow Taxi, and okay, a second later we have it, right? So when I went to Berklee, I think the concept of music business, believe it or not, was still nascent. As a matter of fact, I was part of the first ever graduating class of music business management from Berklee. I went to be a musician. I aspired to be a musician. I thought I was going to be the next Eddie Van Halen. I failed miserably at it.
I played saxophone for 5 years, so basically we're the same.
Well, yeah. You could
Can't even tell us apart at this point.
John Coltrane or Charlie Parker.
We'll start a band, that's okay.
So I decided midway through my studies that I was going to do music business, and I really don't know why. I just thought it sounded respectable enough. And it would be a path that would keep me in music, and maybe, I don't think I could have articulated at the time, help express my creativity, but in a very different way.
Yeah.
And like many things that I've done, if I decide I want to do it, I really immerse myself in it and try and read as much as I can. And I just remember devouring a lot of books about the old titans of industry, the Richard Bransons and the David Geffens, and the Irving Azoffs, and a lot of people that maybe you heard these names, maybe not, but these are the Chris Blackwells. These are the people that built, in many ways, the modern music business. And I do think that it's important, if you want to disrupt something, if you want to be a part of something, to understand where it's come from. Maybe because I'm Greek and I've grown to revere history. I've always felt that was important, whatever I've done. So yeah, different era.
Yeah, completely different era. And I mean, you said you were part of that kind of founding class. You then took, obviously, the lessons that you learned at Berklee, applied them to the real world, tried to solve some of the problems that you saw with the industry by founding your own company. Can you talk to me a bit about Sonic Bids and what you saw the problem to be and what your solution to that problem back then was?
Yeah, so after I left Berklee, I sometimes it helps to not have any options. So my plan A without plan B was I got to figure out a way to stay in America no matter what. I'm not going back to Cyprus. Back then, it's funny because at my age now, I only want to go back.
I was going to say, I believe you're going back after this.
I am going back after this because I'm very connected to my home country. And it's something that I want to talk a bit later about Australia. But I ended up, and I'll fast forward, I became a talent agent. Through an internship. Internship would have been the only way for me to stay in America. At the time, I think the only way to be in a music industry was to, by and large, be in America. Again, I think the world's changed a lot, whether it's in music, whether it's in sports. You know, my original ambition when I was 5 was to be a footballer or a soccer player. I mean, nowadays, you can be from anywhere and aspire to do that. Back then, no. For me to play for my team Arsenal would have been impossible. Today, you can aspire to it, and there's a better chance, right? The same with music and the music industry. So I became a talent agent. I ended up being in charge of global touring for a lot of world-renowned artists, a lot of jazz artists. So I booked people like Nina Simone and Leonard Cohen, and jazz artists like Chick Corea, the pianist, and Pat Metheny, the guitar player, and many, many others. People that I grew up admiring. Sonny Rollins, the saxophonist. And through that, I got the idea of starting Sonic Bids. It was the late 90s. I thought, okay, the people that I'm booking are making 10, 15, 20, 30, 40, 60, $100,000 a night. Where does everybody else go? How do they connect? And I was getting bombarded with, I know I'm talking about a different era, CDs, compact discs, those little shiny things that you load somewhere and you listen to them. And yes, there was still a remnant of cassette tapes. And I thought, wow, like I can't take these people on. I mean, as an agent, unless we're making $2,000, $3,000 a night,
not worth it.
Your 10% commission is nothing, right? And paradoxically, it's easier to book somebody for 100,000 than it is to book somebody for 1,000. So I had this concept. Again, you have to bring yourself back in an era where the modern era of the internet was just taking off. And I thought, what if I could create what I'll describe as a two-sided marketplace that connected artists with people who book music? What if I could standardize that process? And that was the vision behind Sonic Bids. And again, it was a different era. I didn't raise a bunch of venture capital money to begin with. It was my own money, friends, family. I just scraped it together. And I launched the company in 2000. And it was actually the reason why I first came to Australia. I ended up, at one point, I forget, but a very large percentage of our membership was from Australia.
Why do you think that is?
Well, I'm from an island, and I think that, Australia, in my mind, is a very, very, very large island. And I think the things that motivated me are the things that probably motivate Australians, right? If you don't have the abundance of your local place, which, Americans are unaware of their privilege by living in such a large market, by having an infrastructure that they take advantage of every day, but it doesn't occur to them, right? There's an expression that a fish doesn't know it's swimming in water. And I think if you grow up in an environment like the United States, even if you're an artist, you're unaware of everything around you that enables you to operate by birthright almost at a higher level than everybody else. So I think the reason was that Australian artists, partially because there was a very robust independent music scene, and because of that sheer motivation, like, okay, outside of the major metropolitan areas, and the government, I don't know if it still does, but back then did a lot for Australian artists, whether it was in Perth or over here. I think there was a motivation for them to go out there and connect and make a career outside of just Australia. And the company grew to about 530,000 members, artists or bands, about 30,000 events around the world. We were the exclusive platform for many events like South by Southwest and many, many, many others. And I'm proud, we had over 1 million gigs happen through the site over the 13-year period that I ran the company. And, I look back and, of course, like everything, you're like, oh, I would have done this, I would have done that. And I sold it in 2013 after a long ride.
Yeah, I mean, building a business is so difficult, and it really can't be underestimated how difficult it is when perhaps you haven't gone through the traditional journey of how entrepreneurialism is kind of demonstrated, of, being a finance bro and then kind of transitioning out of that into this world. For everyone in the room, we heard earlier how important it is to foster innovation, but there are these kind of practical bounds of like, how do you raise capital? How do you go to a VC? How do you pitch yourself? Maybe for those who have an idea but don't know how to take that next step, can you just talk us through practically what was that like for you?
Yeah, it's such a different era. I mean, just to put it in perspective, for me to even launch what would have been called today a brochure website, I mean, I had to go and hire a bunch of people to do it. There wasn't like WordPress or Wix or the kind of stuff that today is there. And I mean, I think that's an interesting thing about innovation, because we tend to think of innovation as something that happens in isolation, but actually it's sequential. Like you're always building on top of something that's come before you, right? I mean, I'm not going to go into the arcane mechanics of internet protocols and all the things that catalyze the rise of the modern internet, but you are literally standing on the shoulder of giants.
Do you think innovation is more accessible now, easier?
Undoubtedly.
Yeah.
Undoubtedly. I mean, do you know that for me to market and find the first few hundred artists to join Sonic Bids, I went and bought it tells you how long ago. There was a newspaper in Boston that would always, it would just publish all the gigs that would happen. And once a year, they had a band guide. And they had several hundred bands with their email addresses. And there was no social. I mean, it's crazy. I'm talking about it. I'm almost embarrassingly old because you're like, oh my God, there was no social media. I mean, there was no Facebook, there was no MySpace, there was no Twitter, there was no Apple Music, there was no Spotify, there was no. I mean, it was barren land in many ways, right? So I had to like literally email artists hand by hand. One by one, please join my service, and this is what I'm going to do. And our first campaign was Sonic Bids. It works, as if it was like a miracle. Actually, something will happen if you join this thing. In terms of raising capital, look, I didn't raise capital for the first 5 years of the company. I mean, again, by today's standards, at the time it was teeny. It was like a $5 or $6 million business when I went to raise capital. Again, today you hear of all these companies that are startups and they have a market cap in the
$2
billions, and the term unicorn for me just applied to something that my 11-year-old kids now like, but certainly not to companies. I think raising capital should be something that you do very deliberately, very thoughtfully, and you got to be very selective. Things that I did not know, that now I know, is how critical your financing partner is. And if they don't share not just your vision, but your ethos and your values, it's not going to be a good marriage. And it is a marriage. I think raising capital, and I advise a lot of companies even today, especially if you're going to do it in America, it's not pitching a company. It's like you're pitching a movie. It's like you're pitching a Hollywood script. It's storytelling. It's not about, look, even there's a big story in the Wall Street Journal, which, I guess it's behind a paywall, so you can't really read about it. But
we're all for paying for news because we love news. It's so important.
Do pay for news.
Or subscribe to us, whichever.
In my opinion, our world depends on paid news. But again, I'm old. But there's a story about J.P. Morgan buying the startup for $150 million. And it turns out they did no diligence. It turns out that even the smartest people in the room, finance people, didn't really bother to look at the underlying numbers,
Yep.
right? And they bought a business that they thought had 4 million users, and it only had about 300,000,
Yeah.
right? And I guess what's my point here? My point is that even finance people, at the end of the day, make decisions based on instinct, on vibe, on feel. I don't care what anybody says. Diligence is there often to reaffirm your beliefs rather than the other way around.
Yep.
So if you want to buy a business, the person who says, I want to buy this business will look at all the data and will be positively affirmative. If you are skeptical, you're going to look at all the data and be positively or negatively dissuaded from doing it.
Yeah.
And I think you got to be aware of that as an entrepreneur, because ultimately, even when I sold my business, because if you think about it, selling a part of your business or selling your business, it's really the same thing, right? It doesn't matter if you sell 10% or 100%.
Yeah.
So the approach is fairly similar, which, by the way, if somebody said, I want to buy your business, you would probably think about it very, very deliberately, right? Should I sell this, right? Well, why would you not give the same amount of thought in somebody who's going to buy 5% of your business or 1% of your business or 50% of your business? Why not? It's the exact same thing.
Yeah.
You're giving up something for the hope of something bigger.
Yeah.
So, I didn't raise capital until 5 years later. I was profitable. I didn't have to raise money. I think that gave me a big advantage. This was before Mark Zuckerberg, before the idea of dual stock. I had read somewhere that I could create 2 classes of stock, where I could somehow have the majority of one class, the voting stock, and that I could sell stock that was non-voting or of a different category. Actually, I had read that the founding family of the New York Times had done it, and I went to my lawyer. I'm like, can I do this? And actually, by creating that dual structure, I was able to have a successful exit. Otherwise, frankly, my venture capitalists, who I say the fact that we're still friends and they talk to me to this day, means that I had a successful exit. But I think that they would have probably taken a lot of the value from my early investors, which were friends and family.
Yeah.
And I just could not live with myself if I did that.
Yeah.
I couldn't, even if I made a great return and I had a life-changing event, I wouldn't feel okay if my dad, who took some of his retirement money and didn't know anything about what I'm talking about. I think to this day he can't tell what the company did.
Yeah.
I
think that's a rite of passage.
I'm not even sure if he knows if he can describe what I do today.
Yeah.
Because my dad was a geologist. I mean, he's had a great career. But when I was growing up, he was a geologist. So he operated a different kind of rock than I did.
Yeah. Took a while for me to understand what you were just saying there. I want to pick up.
We both studied rock, just in a different way.
rock. I don't know which one's cooler. I want to put
Well, it's Australia. You guys have a lot of mineral wealth. I'd say.
We do.
I don't know which rock here is more cool.
I'll pick up on the idea of this kind of storytelling element that a founder or an entrepreneur has to do in order to really pitch themselves. I'll put a pin in that and pick it up a bit later when we talk about your book. But I do just want to ask about, you mentioned that you successfully exited your business. And I'm curious, since you did exit, do you think that tech has further leveled the playing field for artists since that time? Or do you think we've seen a kind of stagnation over the period since you exited Sonic Bids?
I've given a lot of thought to that question because I was surprised by your research, because you said something about the artistic middle class. And I don't know, I guess I was socialist in a past life, so I used to talk about this artistic middle class.
Yeah, I went deep in old interviews.
Yeah, I know. It was super impressive. I think overall, artists are a lot better off today. And I know it's a controversial statement, and I'm sure many of you, your brains right now are thinking, God,
must have been real bad back then.
or this guy is like, I'm totally losing your focus on what I'm saying. Being an artist was always very hard. Right? I mean, it's easy for us to sit here and say, here's all the reasons why it's hard to be an artist today. But being an artist, connecting with an audience, and developing a career, and I want to distinguish between the two. I think developing a sustainable career is very, 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 very hard. And arguably, maybe harder today. But I think that to go from like level 0 to whatever, 1, 2, 3, I do think that if you harken back to the era where unless you got signed to a label, it would be impossible for you to connect meaningfully with an audience, unless you got distribution in the physical record shop, unless you had a team around you that was your agent and your manager, and that only happened once you were able to get a label, right? So you were hoping for effectively to be one of like whatever 1% of people that actually even got to that first step. I think that was very difficult. And then fine, you signed a contract, and then good luck. Like then the odds were still stacked against you because it was still very hard to break out. It was still hard to get on radio. It was still hard to, sell enough units to actually recoup whatever advance you got. It was still hard to negotiate a decent royalty rate so that you would actually see and get some income. And if you were in a band of 4, and then you had a manager, I mean, it's hard. It was hard. It's very hard today. Yes, streaming has fundamentally changed the economics of everything. But on the other hand, I see so many more options for artists today than even when I launched my company 25 years ago. That I feel really good. I also feel great about and again, it's very tempting to say, they don't make music the way they used to. And I'm of a certain age that, certainly I grew up in the 80s, right? So I love that music. I'm a Depeche Mode fan, an INXS fan, a Duran Duran fan. That's the music that I grew up with, right? And I still think it's, Tears for Fears. I still geek out on Sowing the Seeds of Love and the amazing production of that record. But there's amazing music being created today. So clearly, I think that the fact that if an industry is dying, then you don't see innovation. And you don't see people entering it. But I think for me, the industry is clearly on an upswing because there's even more music being released. There's even more artists today that are entering than there was years ago. And I would argue there's amazing music. I mean, I don't know if you all had the chance to see the Grammys this year, but I thought our best new artist nominees and the performances were amazing. And you're also seeing innovation in artistry. I think Chappell Roan is amazingly innovative, right? I think that everything, when you look at just that slate, the Benson Boones and the Teddy Swims and the Shabuzis and the Charlie XCX. I mean, not everything is my personal cup of tea, but it's awesome music. You see innovation.
What sort of innovation are you referring there to? Because I think we can have quite strict ideas of innovation.
I mean, for me, it's artistic innovation.
Yeah.
I think, and somebody may say, well, this is derivative or whatever, but okay, all innovation is derivative.
Yeah.
I think you see innovation in creativity. I think you see innovation in the way that people are connecting with audiences. I think you see innovation even within the industry. AI is going to be the 100x force applied onto the industry that's going to blow up and change up everything.
How do you think it will blow it up? What do you envisage happening there with AI? Small question.
Oh my God, that's a whole different panel altogether. I think that we're spending a lot of time, rightfully so, on the creative aspects that AI will affect. And I think that we should be concerned. And I do think that as an industry, we got to come together and talk about what's an acceptable and ethical use of AI.
Yep.
But I think there's also a lot of exciting uses, even on the creative side, that you should not stomp out. I mean, arguably, musicians have been the best leveragers, whatever the word would be, of the best users of technology since somebody found a bone fragment and drilled a couple of holes and created a flute, right? I mean, if you look at a piano and you open it up, I don't know what kind of twisted mind came up with that idea.
How did you do that?
How did you do that? How do you come up with that? But then I also feel that when it comes to remuneration of artists, matching of rights owners, a lot of the stuff that was very difficult, I mean, there's an enormous amount of money globally that is not distributed, is not collected. I just think AI can be a game changer. I think for artists, when it comes to marketing, predictive analytics can help you better target your audiences. You can intelligently use data, right, to develop your career meaningfully, spend your however little money you have a lot more effectively.
Yeah.
So I just don't think we should take some big broad brush and apply it and say AI,
Yeah.
and it's bad or good.
Not binary.
I mean, a pencil is bad or good depending on how you choose to use it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Can hurt if you prick yourself with it.
Exactly. Or you
Lived
can
experience there.
write beautiful poetry or
Exactly.
crazy scribbles.
Yeah. Yeah. Super interesting. So not binary, nuance on both sides there. Some clear pros and also some cons.
Yeah, and if you look at the trajectory of the industry, right? I mean, we would not be. You look at technology often within isolation. So you tend to think, I don't know, I'll take multi-track recording, right? And maybe a little known fact, a guy called Les Paul, who also has a very well-known guitar named after him because the guy was a pioneer, invented multi-track recording, right? And maybe some of you in the audience are like, what the hell is multi-track recording? Well, once upon a time, the only way to record sound, which is literally stick a microphone and people played live, and that was it. And then you created channels and tracks, and you could mix and create different things. And then you have the Beatles using multi-track recording and creating these sonic masterpieces like Sgt. Pepper. Well, if you think of it as just in isolation of it changed recording, it's beyond that. It changed the nature of expression, right? Because for the first time in human history, you could express something with sound that could not necessarily be replicated live, right? So all of a sudden you went from just live performance to painting pictures with sound. And if it wasn't for that, there would not be any sampling, which means there would not be any hip hop music, which means there would not be any EDM music. So it doesn't just change the discipline, it also changes the artistry that comes with that. Yeah. So I think AI, and let's face it, as humans, we're terrible at predicting anything, right? I mean, I've been around since before the internet became what it is today. Could I have predicted that we would be where? No, never, right? That I'll be walking from my hotel room here using my phone to help me walk, and somehow I would trust my phone. I mean, think about how crazy it is. Like, if you think about it, right? You're just trusting something to tell you where to go. Yeah. Like, what happened to my own judgment? Yeah. So or my own sense of direction, or just stopping a stranger and be like, like, who would you trust more, your phone or a stranger?
Always my phone.
Always a phone.
Always.
So you trust a machine more than you trust a human. That is insane.
Existential
when you really
crisis
think about
incoming.
it.
Yeah. I mean, we are very adaptable, certainly, as we've seen with all of this technological innovation. I want to just jump forward a bit because I'm dying to ask you about the Grammys. So you wear many, many hats. One of them, as I just said, as the president of the Recording Academy. I have so many questions I want to ask you.
God.
Mostly just like, what the hell is it like? But we won't go there. We'll ask sophisticated questions. Under your leadership, the Academy has really expanded beyond just this kind of inward-looking, US-centric approach. And I'd love you to unpack why that is, why you've driven this, and what we can expect it to look like in the years to come.
I joined the Academy 4 years ago, and so much is informed by my own experience. And, I was very lucky that I was able to go to another country and have a career of one of which I could have never predicted, ever. There's no chance if somebody told me at 12 that I'd be doing this job, I would have said, oh, absolutely, ever. So what informed me was this belief that talent is everywhere. It really is. And I've traveled the world, literally traveled the world, both at Sonic Bids, where we would just literally go and have random dinners. I would organize these dinners of members in different countries, like independent artists, and I would just pick a Greek restaurant because I always know what to order. And I would just invite them. And yes, I found a Greek restaurant.
The UN of music.
Yes, and I found a Greek restaurant in Iceland. I found a Greek restaurant in Berlin, everywhere. And I learned a lot. But what it told me is that talent is everywhere, but opportunity is not evenly distributed. And I feel that the Recording Academy, even when I was being recruited for it, I said, look, you guys have the world's biggest platform for advocacy, for support, for education. The Recording Academy has a membership of 13,000 artists. They're not something that's very important to understand. These are not business people. These are all creators. They're producers, engineers, arrangers, songwriters, performers. They are not people like me. They're not label heads. They're not managers. They're not agents. And these, if you think of the construct of an organization built by creatives, our board, we have a 45-member board. And these are not exactly, I see Annabelle being like, tell me about it.
Too many people.
But it's a board comprised of 45 artists. And however that challenging may be, think about an organization that is by artists, for artists, to advocate and advance artists. And I don't think I'm overstating what I believe that the most important class of citizens is the artistic class. I really think that especially given what the world is going through right now, I do think that we depend on artists to keep us together and hold us together as a society. So I think I saw the Academy and I felt you have to reflect the world that you operate in, not just America. I mean, Americans are by nature, even worse today, they're isolationists. I mean, they are navel gazing, right? They don't think outside of, again, I talked about the water and the fish. And I felt that the Academy has an opportunity to take its platform and be a lot more representative. And again, if you live in America, they tend to define diversity in a very specific way. And I have a very different view of diversity, right? I mean, we are 8+ billion people, and every one of them actually expresses themselves through music and enjoys music. It's everybody. You got to reflect that. And I mean, I'm proud of the fact that, a couple of years ago we had Bad Bunny open the show. That would have never happened in the Academy of yesteryear. We advanced the creation of the African music performance category, and you had Burna Boy play. My dream is that has to be a lot more representative, both in terms of what I'll call the American show, because it is an American show. It's from music released in America, as globally renowned as it is. I like to see more academies around the world, which is something that we're working on, and also more diversity in the representation of that of the Grammys. I just think it's important, and it's the mission of the organization, right? How do you use music to make the world better? So that's why you see what you see. I'm proud of the nominations this year. We have a lot more. Any organization, you're only as good as your voting body, right? Not just any society. You're only as good as who votes and how you're mobilizing that vote. And we've been very intentional in admitting a lot more women voters. We've welcomed 3,000 women voters more since 2020. We have over 40% of our members are now people of color. Over 65% of the membership is joined over the last 5 years. Because unless you are intentional in the way that you're creating this mosaic of voters and then you mobilize them to vote and you make it easier for them to vote. So a big part of my job has been to focus on the systems, the underlying platforms that most people won't even care about. But you know what? If you're 26, I'm sorry, you're not going to go through 1,100 submissions for Album of the Year and just page every one of them, starting from A to Z. You're going to vote for ABBA, right?
I'm 28 and I would vote for ABBA. Still.
Exactly.
Bangers, obviously.
Or like Aaron somebody, I don't know. Name your band Aaron. You have a great chance of getting. I'm joking.
Key takeaway.
Yeah.
Get to Grammys. Name your band
My lawyers
Aaron.
will come and yank me off the stage right now. But I'm just saying these things are important to focus on as an organization if you want that slate of nominees to be reflective of the industry.
Yeah.
So you got to diversify.
Yeah, yeah. And clearly so many steps have already been taken, and it's exciting for us to see that kind of growing globalization as well as the changes, the diversity, the inclusion that's happening inside as well.
Yeah, you know, forces may want to try and stop it, but for me, globalization is inevitable. And I don't think that it's globalization in the form of suppressing other forms of expression that don't adhere to like Western ideals. I think it's the other way around. Some people, the expression, you know, economists have used the term globalization.
Yeah.
But I think the world is more beautiful if we have a lot more sonic, you know, experiences.
Yeah.
I mean, Greek is my first language. You know, I did not have the privilege or whatever, however you want to see it, of speaking a language that everybody speaks around the world, right? And I think that we are moving in an era that is away from traditional Anglo domination.
Yeah.
And I know I'm speaking to an English language speaking country, but I think it's for the better.
Yeah.
Like, why not?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, language is music anyway, so why not have more diverse listenings?
Yeah. I know we're running out of time, so I just have to ask, and then we'll move on to your book to finish. Can you just tell us what the Grammys is like? Like, I mean, hopefully some people in the room are going to go. I'm really excited for them at some point in their careers, but perhaps some of us might not. Maybe the invitation will come after this. But what's it like? Like, just give me just a little bit.
Well, first of all, the Grammys, I mean, there's the event, and it's worth noting, what you see on TV is 10 of the 95 categories, right? So there's a ceremony earlier that gives 80 of the categories, which I find not a lot more fun. It's just fun because it's a lot more kind of like this. It's informal, it's very celebratory, and also it's a week-long set of activities. Look, I spend most of the night just running around, and it's very intense for me, right? I mean, even what you see, like the red carpet and everything, is like there's a lot of intensity. Like, it's fun because it's a big celebration. Like when you really think about it, what it is, right? It's a bunch of peers celebrating their peers for the output they did that year, and they consider that to be the most excellent. It's not about popularity, it's not about streaming, it's not a juried audit. It's 13,000 people saying, in this category, I think this is excellent. And I do love the way that we've changed the show, especially with our producer, Ben Winston, where I don't know, again, if you've seen it or not, but you know, we have the bistro tables with the art, and I just feel it feels a lot more like a celebration of just the amazing shared experiences we have as people. It's not just about the superstars performing. I think it breaks a bit. If you come to the show, the stage, the way that it's set up, the proximity to the tables and the audiences, it just feels a lot more what it's meant to be. But it's fun. The 3.5 hours go really fast. Again, I actually love the rehearsals because that's when I get to experience the show. I love the rehearsals before the dress rehearsals because I just love to see the sausage making, if you will. That's the fun. Actually, that's when you realize that everybody is perfect in their imperfections, right? And it's so cool to see that happening versus the end product.
Yeah.
But you know, it's if you ever had the chance to experience it, it's an amazing night. You know, you leave feeling very good about people.
The future, yeah.
I mean, I know you may be thinking, oh my God, yeah, Beyonce should have won, shouldn't have won, whatever.
We're all thinking it, but Might have to pick up my saxophone to get an invite. I do want to end by talking about your book, Two Beats Ahead. I know you have a huge fan in Megan who has, just said what an incredible book this is. For those, though, who haven't read it, I think it's fair to say that kind of the key takeaways all center around this idea that musicians, that creatives are inherently entrepreneurial. Can you just talk to that? Because I was saying to you when we spoke earlier that this was a really new idea to me, that I have had this really kind of rigid view in my experience as a founder of what an entrepreneur looks like, sounds like, what they do. But you're saying that's not the case, and that really these creative attributes are going to help people be entrepreneurs. Can you talk me through it?
Yeah, a lot of it was in 2 minutes and 45 seconds. A lot of it was informed by my own experience. And I think, it's changing, but business schools that somehow have co-opted the idea of entrepreneurship teach entrepreneurship in a very specific way. And I think that there's this fallacy that, all you have to do is just, create a particular plan, and then it's just about rote execution. And it just doesn't really work that way. I do think that the art of the act of expressing yourself musically, those instincts are very similar to what compels you to want to create something, right? I mean, entrepreneurship is in of itself a creative expression of something, right? It's you have intentionality in what you're trying to say. I mean, if you're selling coffee, you're speaking through that product, and you're trying to, communicate something through that product. If it's beyond just like, some sort of, what's the word that I'm looking for? Clearly you can have like functional selling of something, and just like you can have functional music. So for me, I always felt that musicians and entrepreneurs label things differently, right? You can call it a demo tape, or you can call it a prototype, right?
MVP.
Or an MVP. Yeah. The idea of iteration, of collaborating with people. Entrepreneurialism is by nature a collaborative discipline. Creating music is by nature a collaborative discipline. Even if you play solo piano, you still collaborate with somebody. You're responsive, right? If you're an artist and you're in an audience, you respond to the audience and you change and adapt. Entrepreneurialism is very similar to that. So in the book, which is called Two Beats Ahead, which is actually an expression that we got from Chance the Rapper, who said that, music is always 2 beats ahead of everything else in terms of culture, in terms of technology. The idea, we interviewed a lot of creators, people like, at the time, Pharrell and Justin Timberlake, and even people in the music business like Jimmy Iovine and T-Bone Burnett, the producer, and a lot of others, and said, okay, we try to distill these into mindsets that are shared between the two. Then we have a lot of interesting anecdotes and stories, but, I was blown away, for example, at the commonalities that exist between management, corporate management, and being a producer, right? And I say to folks, most people can't really tell you what a producer does. They don't necessarily play music, they don't operate the console, but what they do is create conditions for talent to shine. And that's what a manager does. I mean, meaning in a corporate setting. Like, my job at the academy is to hire good people and then ultimately give them the space to creatively express themselves, right? And that's what a music producer does. So I think that we tend to compartmentalize, but the whole idea of the book was to give confidence to creatives that you have the instincts that you need to develop your career. You just happen to be labeling them differently. So at Berklee, and we didn't talk at all about that part of my life, but at Berklee, after I sold my company, I created an institute called Institute for Creative Entrepreneurship that was actually the genesis of the book. It started with a class that I co-taught with my co-writer from IDEO, the design group. And then that evolved eventually into a book, into a minor at the university, and then it's been part of the master's program as well.
Unbelievable. I think that we have probably run out of time for questions, but I think that that's a really nice note to end on. This idea that everyone in this room has these kind of deeply embedded attributes that can help them make their way through entrepreneurialism, whether they know it or not. And I think that's a lovely parting note. Panos, thank you so much for your time, for your insights.
Thank you.
Thank you.